The Oklahoma City Thunder select Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga University.
What a pass. Giddy underneath for JRE. The reverse and the rookie-to-rookie action. SGA defended closely by Westbrook. Tough. Step back. Gets up the shot. Banks it in for the lead.
This is Udart. You're listening to the Uncontested.
What is up, and welcome to the Uncontested Podcast. Coming to you live Wednesday, May 24th, as we are about 4 weeks away from the NBA draft. I'm your host for the evening, Jacob Niffen. I've got Tayler Peterson with me, but more importantly than Tayler, we have the NBA draft GOAT, the man behind the Hoop Intellect Twitter and YouTube account. We've got Keandre here. Keandre, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. I appreciate you guys having me on once again.
Of course, yeah. We had you on last year. Obviously, a huge draft for the Thunder. Hoping this one will be a big one as well. And there is never anybody better to get on a draft show than Keandre. Now, if you guys don't already follow his YouTube channel, some of the best scouting videos that you can get for the draft. He hits the positives of the players, the places of improvement, and then draft range. And my favorite, we'll always throw out an NBA comp to kind of get you acquainted with what that player might be like. So, Keandre, before we dive into the 2023 class, first just wanted to pick your brain a little bit about what you do and how you got started. When did scouting college and overseas guys and looking at NBA draft process, when did that start for you?
Yeah, so originally when I was in college, so it was kind of like a whole process of things that was going on. So I went to Oklahoma State. Some people know that, some people don't.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I went to Oklahoma State, and I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do exactly. I was majoring in sports media. One of the things that I did at the time was write about the draft. So on Medium, it was just kind of more casual stuff, just trying to kind of get into certain things. But I had always followed the NBA draft for a long time. Just like being a kid and all that. Just it was just always interesting to me. I like watching college and then seeing them where people would go and all those types of things. So doing a little draft writing, and then at a certain point, this is like really condensing the story. But at a certain point, I decided to kind of turn that into the YouTube channel and the YouTube videos. I had already been uploading like highlights and kind of working on my editing and Photoshop skills, kind of trying to build those so I could actually make videos that people would want to watch, which is funny that those ended up being those, because I don't think that those were that good at the time. But yeah, that's kind of the very short version of the story. And then just kind of from there, just getting better and learning from different people in terms of like the scouting stuff, and then also improving the editing and all that kind of stuff, just all going into one. So that's kind of how I got started, and then just kind of been trying to get better at it and learn from certain things that I've done well, certain things that I haven't done as well from that point on. So, yeah.
So that is a perfect lead into the next question I have for you. But you also brought up something additional that I find really interesting, kind of want to pick your brain on as well. But you mentioned the YouTube channel, right? This all kind of led to the YouTube channel. And like you said, clipping those highlights, putting some highlights to these prospects together. How long have you been doing the YouTube channel for the listeners who are just tuning in, maybe, who didn't get to listen to you on our podcast last year? And how did it kind of become a thing? And I think my follow-up question to that is you mentioned some of the people you've gotten to know. The YouTube channel, did that kind of lead to getting to know some of these scouts and different people that kind of helped you improve as a draft analyst?
Yeah, so I can't remember exactly. I think it was 2018 that I actually started the channel, because it was my sophomore year, and I came to school and I was like, I'm about to do something. I wrote down a whole bunch of things, like these are the things I want to accomplish potentially, or things I want to try. And on that, like the first night that I got to my dorm, I was like, I wrote down Hoop Intellect. That was the name of the channel, and I made it the next day.
That's really cool.
So nothing really came out of that, because I couldn't edit at all, like very well. But that's when I started, and then just kind of things kind of grew from there, of course, like I was mentioning. And it took on a lot of different forms. I used to do like highlights specifically of like the more obscure players or up and coming players in the league. So like Alex Caruso was one of those at the time, because, Bleacher Report or House of Highlights, they weren't going to make a video on him at that point in time. And it ended up blowing up, got like 700,000 views. It was just kind of more to like attract eyes to the channel as I was like trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do specifically content wise. So that's a little more detail on that. And then in terms of like meeting people, yeah, that's definitely what has, propelled and kind of, put me in a lot of different spaces and, getting follows from different type of people that I've always followed in the community for years. And then obviously getting to meet some of them at Summer League and, having interactions with players and here and there and everything like that. So that's all been really cool to kind of experience it. Sometimes I have to like really think about it, because like since the pandemic, time has just been weird for everybody. But like just kind of looking back, and it blew up in 2020. So just kind of looking back, it is crazy that it's gotten to this point, but I'm always appreciative that it is where it is now.
So Keandre, Hoop Intellect is like a one-man show, right? Like other places, they've got people scouting, giving like the info about the players, other people pulling clips, other people doing the editing for the channel. This is just the Keandre product, right? Like you're doing everything.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I
need to get you an intern, my guy.
I've been putting up triple doubles, no assists for the last 3 years. I need some teammates for real, but it's just me, for everything from the graphics to the music to obviously the information and the scouting that people, really come for. That's all me. It takes a lot of time that people don't ordinarily have. I've just been in an interesting position to be able to like do it. It's like a weird time period for me. But yeah, it's just all me.
Can you give us, I don't know if this is like too deep in the weeds or not, but can you give us an example of like, so for instance, you drop the Amen Thompson scouting report, right? And you've got, all of them are about like 8 to 12 minutes. You've got the pros, the cons of the player, the draft range, all that stuff. From starting to put that video together to finished product uploaded on the channel, we looking at like a couple hours, 10 hours, like how much work goes into each of those videos?
So I guess it would just kind of depend. I get this question a lot, and it's hard to like really calculate or come up with like a real number. I really should at some point kind of try to figure it out. But I only say that because like throughout the year, I'm cutting up games, and that doesn't necessarily count.
Yeah.
So like when I sit down and like I'm gonna make this video right now, but like there's a kind of accumulation of hours to put into things. But I'll go through. I got the games. I'll clip some games, and have the other stuff that I already have and highlights and everything like that. So I think it's probably like a couple days. Like I don't know like the hour amount that I would put on that, but a couple days. Victor Wembanyama, more like a week, because it's just so much to go through. It's like how I was saying this before, like that original video was like 30 minutes long, and I had to trim it to some manageable, sort of time so people could like consume it easily. But like
probably a little easier this season with him being on the NBA app compared to previous years, where we're all like scratching for any bits of like YouTube highlights we can even get or live stream. Like last year, I remember watching him on like one of it was like VIP league, like dots, whatever, just trying to get a glimpse of Wemby. And this year we're able to have him on the NBA app. Did that help you kind of being able to put some of those clips together and get a little more content on Wembanyama this year?
Yeah, it helped in some ways, and it was also like a little bit more difficult because the NBA app
copyright
they wouldn't keep their games like on like the NBA. I'm gonna go on a quick rant here, but the NBA's like interface on their apps or on their website is like kind of iffy. Like it's not super accessible. So like it would only be the most recent games that were on there sometimes. So if I didn't clip it like at that moment or that week, then it was harder to access. So the other stuff, when they have it on LMB official site, you can actually go on there and watch those full games. Obviously, the commentary is in French, but it's we just come in for the game,
right? Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what I did this year. But yeah, there's a lot of different sources throughout all the videos and everything that I make. So, but it was more accessible this year, just in general, just because he is one of those guys.
Definitely. Speaking of like scouting a guy like Wembanyama, like he's almost an impossible one to miss on, right? Like everybody has had Victor at number one, like since they heard the name basically and saw the kid. I saw, was it that ESPN essay that Gavoni and Windhorst did where it showed Victor playing as like a 12-year-old or whatever, and he's like, it looks like two kids, one stacked on top of the shoulders of the other one. I'm like, dude, could you imagine walking into your local YMCA for Little League and you got to play against that? Anyways, Keandre, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So Victor's an easy one to scout. Who is a guy that you've scouted? Maybe it's a recent draft, maybe it's all the way back to like the beginning of the YouTube channel, that you just totally missed on. Like a guy that you were hyping up and they just completely crapped the bed, and you're like, oh my God, this one was a swing and a miss.
Yeah, totally. I'm trying to think quickly. I think the first one that comes to mind that I was like really high on was maybe Kai Jones, and I still think that he's got potential to be a role player in the league, like super energy guy. If you've seen the highlights, like he's still jumping out the gym, but like that specifically, a high level athlete who doesn't really do too much else substantial. That's like not something that I'm as high on now, and that's something I've kind of learned over time. But I was, I thought he was a lottery guy. I think I had him like maybe 11th in that class, so he'd definitely be one of those guys. But I'm sure there's some others, but that was the first one that comes to mind.
So flip side of the coin then, who's a guy that maybe some other draft analysts like slept on that you were high on and you totally knocked it out of the park? Like this is your chance to brag on yourself.
Most of them.
Let's see. I gotta look up the drafts because
you're good.
It's always hard for me to think of them on the spot. And also I don't like every day I don't like think about like, oh yeah, I was right this time. Remember when I was right that one time?
See, that's where you and I are different. I'd be talking all kinds of trash to the guys I hit on.
Let's see.
So kind of like you, Keandre, like growing up, big NBA fan, like Allen Iverson, fat head on my wall. And then the Thunder come to town. And then my NBA fandom obviously became very Thunder specific. But I remember just being ecstatic that the Thunder, like most Thunder fans, that they got PG3, Perry Jones III. Like I was convinced, how did he fall to the Thunder in this position? Like this guy is literally, he gets to learn from Kevin Durant. He has the same exact, stature. Like he can be that kind of player, that kind of scorer. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. But that was the first one that I really missed on, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was really young at that time.
Yeah, me too.
He was.
Thanks for aging me, Keandre. I appreciate that.
He was somebody I really liked when he was in college. Obviously, like just being from the area, like I was watching Big 12, so he was one of those guys. I think to the answer to the question, I would probably say that I don't know if it's necessarily like lottery range, but I still think like Moses Moody is going to be a really good player, and he was really a high contributor this year in the playoffs. Obviously, it hasn't like fully come to fruition yet, but he's definitely somebody who I liked, and I think that is going to end up being a really good player. I think from last year's draft almost doesn't count because like
it's still so fresh. Yeah.
Yeah, my little brother here in the comments, Keandre, said the first time I heard of J-Dub was actually from Keandre, the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I was a big fan of his last year. I wish I would have ended up being higher on him. I thought everything, I thought he had the tools and the skill set, of course, but I was just a little skeptical. The Santa Clara, like he wasn't the burstiest dude, but like he can play, and he played in every situation. And he performed in every situation that they put him in, and I should have been a little higher on him than I ended up. I think he was like 15 maybe on my board.
Still
Obviously,
it's pretty close.
And obviously, blew that out of the water immediately. But he was definitely something. I actually have a story about that. When I was watching him and I was putting that video together last year, I was, trying to come up with a comparison. It was really difficult to try to find one that I actually liked. And, the whole time I was watching, I was like, he kind of reminds me of Cade. And I was like, I can't make that comparison because, one, he just came in the league. He was the number 1 pick. But there are some similarities there that I see in their games. Probably not going to take on the same role. So I was like, nah, we'll just throw that away. But then obviously in the league, he is handling the ball, averaging 25 and 5 at the end of the season. So maybe should have stuck my neck out a little bit and been like, hey,
I like that.
And I was about to ask. You said you went to OSU, so you've probably never missed on an OSU prospect, right? You knock all those ones out of the park.
I mean, they haven't really had
Marcus Smart, Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Cade who was the only one.
So speaking of Hayden, he played with the Boone twins. So we know the Boones well.
Yeah, I played against them in the Colvin a couple times at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
Nice, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, while we're on the topic of J-Dub, let's take a quick break. On the other side, we're going to pick Keandre's brain about the Thunder rookies that just finished up and then get into the 2023 class. All right, we are back. So, Keandre, we were getting into J-Dub a little bit there. And you kind of dove in. The Cade comparison is actually like a really fascinating one. I think that's really interesting. But so the Thunder brought in 4 rookies last year. Chet, who we obviously didn't get to see play, unfortunately. J-Dub, Ousmane Dieng, and the other Jalen Williams, Jay Will out of Arkansas. From the 3 that we did get to see play, you've touched on J-Dub a little bit. So those other 2, can you talk about how you felt about those guys this time last year, specifically Ousmane Dieng and Jalen Williams out of Arkansas, kind of what you saw from them in the pre-draft process? And then now that they have their full rookie season under their belt, where you kind of see them at now and what trajectory they're taking.
Yeah, I was a big fan of Ousmane Dieng last year. I thought he was a lottery pick, and I still think that he has a lot of upside, and I would, tell a lot of fans to be patient with him because that was kind of the pitch from the beginning. And, they knew that, everybody knew that, wherever he was going to end up. But obviously, given his size and fluidity and ability to do, a multitude of things on the court in his, second half of the season last year, how he turned it around and was able to do, and handle, more ball handling responsibilities and creation and kind of flash that upside. That was really interesting to see. And it was part of the reason that he ended up being, high on my board. And I enjoyed the pick for the Thunder at that spot. And then for, Jalen Williams, it was kind of more of like this is a guy who doesn't necessarily have the measurables, isn't like a high level athlete. You have some concerns about, some of the rim protection stuff, but he's a big time charge taker and he can, protect the rim in that way. That obviously translated immediately to the NBA. But he's kind of one of those guys who, as a playmaking big, and it's somebody who could be a early second round pick, maybe late first. I think I had him going to the Warriors at one point in one of my mocks last year. Towards the end of the first round, he's one of those guys who can come in and kind of, serve as a hub, do a number of different things, and hopefully he could stretch the floor to kind of see the floor more often, and that kind of came to fruition as well a little bit more. So I was a big fan of the Thunder's draft last year. I felt like it could have. I had some concerns about how it all fit together and like the sort of roles that they all play, at the same time, but they were able to figure it out. Again, J-Dub being as malleable as he is and being able to take on different roles is a big reason that it has worked. Ousmane Dieng being a little bit behind, or kind of taking a slower route in terms of his development is a little more raw, is part of that too. Yeah. And then obviously Jay Will being able to kind of step up and play more with Chet out, was a decent surprise in terms of like him being able to play as early. So
Well, you're nailing these transitions, Keandre, because you mentioned kind of what the Thunder are looking for when they're drafting players. And you mentioned last year, like, love the players they drafted, but weren't sure originally how they would fit. But I think what we've kind of seen throughout the last couple of drafts is the Thunder are drafting a specific type of player, extremely versatile, length, can do a lot with the ball in their hands, both on ball, off ball, and obviously versatility defensively as well. High IQ, high character guys. So that leads us to this year's draft. The Thunder obviously find themselves at pick 12 after having a more impressive season this past season than when they were picking at number 2, getting Chet overall last year. So in that range, who do you think may be available at pick number 12 that you would like for the Thunder? It doesn't have to be one specific guy. It could be a handful of guys, but who are some guys that you think will be in that range that the Thunder could potentially select?
Yeah, it's tough for the Thunder because, like, ideally you would have wanted. Well, they had a great season, and so, like, that was them being able to win and play as well as they did. That was always going to be, the first thing on the list. Like, that's what we play the games for. But ideally, you want to be in the Taylor Hendricks, the Jarris Walker type of range for that, 4-man that can kind of slide in right there.
But we have a question here too, and maybe it's just a good time to go ahead and throw it in. Do you kind of have tier breaks in this draft? And if so, once you get to the tier the Thunder are in, who are some guys maybe that you could see being in the Thunder's tier?
Yeah, so I do. I recently had them out on the last board that I dropped this week. Those are still kind of preliminary, I would say. I'm still kind of workshopping some of those in terms of like where I want to exactly break certain things or interpret certain things. But yeah, so for the Thunder, I think in that sort of general range, we've got guys like in Anthony Black. After that, I think that he's going to go higher, but I think he would be in there. Cason Wallace, Grady Dick, and there's a longer list of some others that could potentially be in that group. Leonard Miller might slide in there. I know a lot of people are interested in Bilal Coulibaly the last couple months as he's kind of worked his way into the rotation for Mets 92 and performed really well. And obviously his ability to defend at a high level on the wing and athleticism and kind of putting all the pieces together that we've kind of seen from him in the past. And then, a guy like a Dariq Whitehead. Now that'll be kind of contingent on the medicals and how they feel about all that type of stuff. But I think he's a guy who could kind of slot in there on the wing as somebody who has improved mightily as a 3-point shooter. And then obviously going back to high school, seeing what we saw him do at Montverde as this a little bit more dynamic wing, had a little bit more pop to his game, able to finish above the rim a little easier.
I've never heard this term before until this year. And I keep forgetting who mentioned this on Twitter, but I loved it. And I've started to use it now. I need to go back and find who it was so I can give them credit. Maybe you'll remember this, Keandre, but they're talking about Dariq Whitehead, and they were talking about how he's healthier this year, or he continued to improve from a health standpoint at Duke. But it wasn't necessarily the injuries, I think, necessarily like holding him back with that Duke team. He found the role that he fit best in, and he did the same, like you mentioned, at Montverde. So they called him an NBA chameleon. And how, again, that kind of goes back to the versatility. I just found that interesting, and when we were discussing, that's kind of what came to mind.
Yeah, that's a positive thing. That was going back to kind of J-Dub too. Just when I saw him in summer league, he played obviously a lot different than he did in the regular season, especially first half of the second half of the year. But like guys who are able to, even given the limitations that Dariq had having a surgery and kind of getting off to a slower start and kind of just having to find his niche, as Tyrese Proctor and Jeremy Roach were handling lead ball handling responsibilities, and they're just all kind of doing their thing already outside of him. He was able to find that role and play it extremely well, and again improve on the shooting in a way that we were kind of waiting on and looking to see coming into the year. So that type of stuff matters to me. Again, like it's going to depend on like what the surgery is. Do they think that it is something that's like debilitating, is going to kind of keep routinely happening in the future? Or is it just something that, short term, he's going to be able to recover? And then he's also one of the youngest guys in his class and is somebody who, might have a little bit more, is in like a buy low type of situation right now because of all that, as a guy who came into the year as a top 7 kind of consensus guy.
I love it. One name you mentioned there in that list of possible Thunder guys at 12, that I want to pick your brain on a little bit. You don't have a scouting video up for him yet, I don't believe. Maybe it's in the pipeline soon, but Leonard Miller is the guy that a lot of Thunder fans are becoming big fans of as a guy that they could possibly take in this draft. Measured out, I think, very impressively at the combine. I think we maybe talked about this in our last show. I understand why they do the measurements at the combine without shoes on. It just drives me nuts because nobody plays basketball without shoes. So why are we doing that? But I think like 6'9.5" without shoes, 7'2" wingspan, weighs like 218 or something like that. He's very impressive. Shot well on the shooting drills, which who the hell really cares about that? It's like an open gym. But tell us a little bit about Leonard Miller, your thoughts on him as a riser in this draft class after entering the combine last year and backing out, and the growth you've seen in his game with the G League Ignite this year.
Yeah, so Leonard Miller kind of bursted onto the scene late in the cycle last year as this like big point forward who was, kind of dominating his competition up in Canada. And, there was a lot of intrigue to that. He came to the combine and didn't perform very well, looked very much behind, the rest of the guys in that class. And he made a great decision, kind of, delaying that NBA clock and, going to the Ignite for a year and being able to play against G League competition and kind of hone things and, really transformed his game in terms of a role perspective. Again, kind of, hitting on that same point that we were before. Before he came in as more like a point forward, kind of a wing, and actually took on that like play finishing role, was setting screens and, operating from the high post and getting on the glass and doing things of that nature. Obviously still grabbing and going in transition and doing those type of things on occasion. But just being a guy who is able to, be productive at that level was definitely something that was a positive sight to see. And he did it, pretty much to the best of his abilities. He's putting up like 33 and 11, some of those games down the stretch and, doing it with and without Scoot Henderson in the lineup. So, as like you mentioned before, a guy who's about 6'10", 6'11", is able to guard multiple positions, or at least will be able to, effectively in time as he, adds a little bit more strength and, get some more experience in those types of things. And is also somebody who can, play inside, play a little outside. The shot is definitely a big thing that's in question and will be.
Still is.
Yeah,
it
down
is
the line.
It's impressive to see the development from, like you said, Keandre. Like we're watching raw tape of him like up in Canada and throwing up 3-point shots. It was an ugly jumper, and not necessarily pretty now, but definitely a lot of improvement. You can tell getting in a program like G League Ignite was really beneficial for him.
Yeah, for sure. So that's going to be something that's more long term. Obviously, if he ends up in OKC, that's something you feel very confident about in the next 2-3 years. Just given the track record and of Chip England and the guys who have come before him in the program. But that's one thing. And then just kind of being that guy who can do a lot of different things and kind of slot into that 4 spot and provide some things in the front court next to your guys in Shea, in J-Dub, in Giddey, and also, to a certain extent, we haven't seen Chet, but I'm sure he's going to be out there creating to a certain degree. That's kind of the pitch for him.
So 2 follow-ups on Leonard Miller real quick. You kind of just started to touch on it. How do you feel like he would pair with Chet? We know Chet is like this super mobile. What's funny is actually last night, Keandre, I have this bad problem of going to bed really late and getting down a YouTube rabbit hole. And last night I watched your video that you did last year of Chet, just because I've been craving like any Chet content at all because we haven't got to see him play in so long. And one thing you pointed out in your Chet video last year is just his ability to be able to guard so many different coverages in the pick and roll. As the big man, he can hedge, he can switch. He's like an elite drop coverage type of guy. So A, how do you think Leonard Miller would fit next to Chet? And then B, a question that I've had a lot about the Leonard Miller fit with OKC is if you brought in Leonard Miller, you have a guy we just talked about in Ousmane Dieng. You have another guy we just talked about in Jay Will. You've got Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who's about to go into his 3rd season. You've got kind of this collection of these kind of big forward / front court guys that are all developing and vying for playing time. How do you see that kind of playing out? Would drafting Leonard Miller to Oklahoma City essentially just be getting him more G League reps with the blue instead of the Ignite? So both of those, what are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, so Chet is going to be interesting to see specifically how they handle it, because, I think that he's going to end up being at his best at the 5, whether that's finishing games or, wherever it is, because just having somebody who is at least not necessarily banging with the bigs, but like when you're finishing a game, offensively, just the stuff that he can do in terms of spacing the floor and being able to make plays and those type of things. I think that he's probably going to be best there, but you also have, the idea of him as a roamer and being able to kind of protect the rim in that way. So you have kind of all these different things that you kind of want to juggle, and I just want to see him on the court first before like I necessarily pin him into one certain thing and like this guy fits the best with him. Obviously, they would have more of a vision of that, being able to see him and know him every day, than we have from 2 years or a year ago college. But I think Leonard, like in theory, like I think that he's somebody who could work next to him. Again, you do worry like somewhat about Chet, like physically, like this is like an overblown point. And I've always been like one to say like he's strong. He's able to navigate his body, maneuver his body away from bigs. And like everybody shared that Duren clip from the Memphis game when he flopped, obviously, but 3 possessions in a row when they started the game, he shut him down.
Yeah.
And, held
People
up.
forget that part.
They try to do the same thing
for
with
his cool highlights.
I know they tried to do the same thing with Wemby as soon as he, was last week with the lottery stuff, showing highlights of Kenny Lofton when he was dominant and almost
USA,
led them to a win. USA, right. So it's like a number of different things, like kind of trying to weigh with Chet, and like, do you want to put like more of a traditional 5 next to him and then, go from there? Or do you want to put like
Leonard Miller?
Leonard Miller or Jalen Williams, like somebody who could potentially handle some of that stuff. So it'll be interesting to kind of see. I'm not 100% sure. Like I go back and forth. Like, is he best here? Is he best here? But in terms of like looking for, what was your second question?
So they have guys like Ousmane Dieng, Will, JRE.
Yeah.
How does Leonard Miller fit into? It feels like there's a lot of guys trying to develop into that front court guy. That would bringing Leonard Miller in just muddy that up more? Is he ready to get NBA minutes now? Is he going to be more of a G League guy when he starts?
I think that he could play in the right situation. I think that he could play in this Thunder situation. They're going to need to make decisions there, and it's going to partially be based off of what Chet does, because you're going to make those decisions like, what do we want next to him? But I think, like, honestly, he could play. Now, I do like Ousmane Dieng a lot, and I probably would go in a different direction than Leonard Miller with this pick. But, like, I think that he's at least a viable option, or somebody who could potentially be in contention for the pick.
Gotcha. And, I totally forgot to mention these guys that we're talking about with the Thunder that are these big forward type guys. I typically forget about him right now because he was injured for so long. But Alexei Pokusevski had a hell of a start to the season playing the 5 as well. So there's a lot of interesting pairings in that front court. A lot of Thunder fans do want a front court player with this pick. But I think you bring up a really interesting point. People forget that Ousmane Dieng was starting to put it all together. And with how young he is, if he does, he could be a fascinating front court pairing with Chet as well.
And I think has a frame, we talked about this, put some size on. And if he's able to do that, to your point, Keandre, like you can easily play him at a 4 forward position next to a Chet. And that's fascinating to think about. Now, we've been talking about a lot of players in that 12 range that the Thunder find themselves in. And Keandre, you mentioned your recent video you have out talking about the tiers you have for this draft. But obviously the Thunder have quite a few picks, specifically this upcoming year, 2024. They have 4 picks to likely convey. I think 2 of them are pick swaps. Utah and then Houston's the other one, alongside 2 additional picks. Like there's a world where they will have 4 first-round picks next year. Yes, first-round picks are extremely valuable, but you also can't use all of them. And so, assuming that they aren't going to use all of them, they're going to use those to trade up or to consolidate. If they do that this draft and they're kind of in that next tier of players, who do you see them or who is in that range? Maybe you think it would be a really good fit for OKC if they were to trade up in this 2023 NBA draft?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would depend on where that is that they traded up into.
I think probably like 6 to 10. I don't. Right. There's a lot of talk of that 5. Portland pick being available. Thunder have nothing that Portland would be interested in, I don't think.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I think that, we kind of mentioned them before, but, Tayler Hendricks, Jarris Walker, those are, some of the, more premier prospects in the class to me. At this point, it would be in that like kind of second tier or second, third-ish type of tier outside of the Victor Wembanyama's and Scoot Henderson's for me personally. So those would be like obvious targets for a number of reasons. They play similar roles, but they have differences in their games. Tayler Hendricks is somebody who's a little bit more proven as a shooter. Probably, I would say, is probably the better rim protector, just given his size, length,
shot blocker,
and he's able to get up a little quicker. But Jarris Walker is no slouch in that regard either. And then he's able to make more plays. Tayler Hendricks is a little bit more, behind in that aspect. So, but either of those guys would be a definite person I think the Thunder would target. And again, like given that they do have so many picks over the next year and beyond, I think that they would definitely be, prime candidates to want to trade up either here or, even trade up into, behind 12 or, go get another guy, because I don't think that they have necessarily a ton of time to want to bring in a bunch of people. And obviously contract wise and like given the roster, I don't think they have too much space to do that either. But they want to like speed that kind of process up given how successful they were last year and just not wanting to like bring a guy in knowing that he's going to take a year or two just to like get as good as you want him to be, if that makes kind of sense. So
yeah, no, it definitely makes sense
for sure.
And I think about like you mentioned Anthony Black earlier. Again, you kind of get to a point with this team, like how many Anthony Blacks, Josh Giddeys, Usman Jenks can you have on the team? But Anthony Black brings so much more in terms of the defensive versatility, defensive strength, a great point of attack defender, great playmaker, nice floater. Needs to work on that jumper and the touch around the rim. But even like a Cason Wallace, a Grady Dick, that could potentially be in that range. Even a Sarr, if he were to fall a little bit, are all guys I kind of think maybe that could fall to the Thunder if they were to trade up there.
Yeah, those are all the guys who would be in that kind of range for me. 6 to 10, probably a little, maybe one of them drops to the Thunder, and I think that could be a possibility. Somebody ends up, taking their guy before we all think it's going to go a certain way. Yeah. But those are definitely the guys.
Definitely. So, Keandre, if I told you that on draft night, the Thunder were moving up to like 8 to that Washington pick. And all 3 of these guys won't be there at 8, but let's say at 8, they had the option of Jarris Walker, Tayler Hendricks, and Ausar Thompson. Fit-wise, which one of those 3 do you like the most for Oklahoma City right now?
Yeah. I think that I like Tayler Hendricks most. Only because, and this is a really hard thing to do with the draft, and I've like talked about this. You see other people talking about this on Twitter. It's like, I do like Jarris Walker. I think it's like really close. Tayler Hendricks just being a better shooter and like having the guys that we know can make plays already, and Shea is one of those guys. So we want to put the ball in his hands as much as possible. Giddey is top playmaker in the league. We've seen him pass the ball. We do what he did. J-Dub is proving himself to be one of those guys. So it's like that's a lot of mouths to feed already in the lineup. And for Jarris to be unlocked, you kind of want him to be able to do certain things with the ball, be able to make, a few more plays on a short roll.
In the high post and the short roll, yeah.
Yeah. And Taylor Hendricks is being more of a play finisher, even being able to finish lobs a little easier and, knock down threes, like we said before, at a higher clip. I think that that's probably a little more appealing right now. Just like if we're just wiping everything away, be like, who's the best fit for this team next year immediately? I'd probably go with Hendricks, but I don't think you can go wrong with either all three of those guys.
Okay. I love it. Last one before we move on to our last section. You mentioned him earlier. He's a guy that I'm really high on for the Thunder. I think would fit really well. Can you give us the quick elevator pitch for Cason Wallace?
Yeah, Cason Wallace. He's one of my favorite players to watch in this class. I love watching him defend. Obviously being, about 6'4", being a dog of a point of attack defender, being able to cut off drives and, do things in that way and shut people down. And also being able to absorb contact, guard up a little bit more than his, size would necessarily suggest. And also being an instinctive defender off the ball and being able to make plays there in ways that we don't necessarily see from freshman guards immediately. Like what he was doing in the Champions Classic and against Michigan State was, NBA veteran type of stuff. And he was doing that from the jump. And there's always a little bit of growing pains for those freshman guards, but that's the main pitch for him is defensively. He's going to bring that to the table and do that at a very high level from the jump. And then also I buy him as a shooter. I think that he's at least going to be solid at the next level. I think that he is a very good bet to play off the ball for that reason. And he's also able to make plays at a solid level, run a pick and roll, and also get into, the dribble pull up in the mid range at a decent level. There's some concerns about, him being able to get to the basket and, just in his creativity overall as an offensive player. That'd be the biggest hesitation behind him. But as a guy who can defend at a high level, knock down a shot and, make a play for another guy in sort of a complementary role, it might not be like your lead guard, but in that sort of role, that's the pitch for him. And I think next in this Thunder situation, even with the Lou Dort here, wherever he goes, whatever the plans are, I think that he's somebody who could fit in and play maybe a little bit more with a little more versatility than people are kind of pinning him with the point guard. I think that he could play on the wing a little easier than people think.
So Jake and I actually were talking about this Sunday for a little bit. His numbers did dip at the end of the season, but he was kind of forced into to your point, Keandre, more of a main ball handler role. And we saw those numbers dip there, but when he was playing with the full strength Kentucky team and wasn't relied on quite as heavily to be that main playmaker, that main ball handler, that's where we saw the catch and shoot numbers be a lot better. Like you said, the 3-point shot in general, and even just a little more playmaking off ball and moving off ball. So, yeah, I agree. I think he has a lot more than he was able to even showcase at Kentucky.
Yeah, I like him a lot. Tell me if I'm wrong here. Defensively, he gives me Davion Mitchell from Baylor vibes.
Yeah, he's a little bigger. Not as like Davion is like top 1% of like lateral movers and being able to mirror, but Cason is up there. He's he's right there.
He's a guy I've really grown on throughout the draft process. All right, we're going to hit another break real quick. On the other side, we've got chat questions for Keandre, and we're going to do a little game before we get out of here. All right, we are back. Keandre, a few questions in the chat we want to get answered by you real quick. This first one, J-Dub's stats were better than Jaylen Brown's 21-year-old stats, and he has the same physical tools. What do you think J-Dub's ceiling is after seeing his rookie season?
Man, I always do the ceiling and floors for the draft prospect videos, but those are always rough, like rough estimates. I honestly don't want to put too much of a ceiling on J-Dub. I think that he can be an all-star from what he showed. I don't necessarily think Jaylen Brown is like the sort of goal for him because, Jaylen Brown has certain things in his game that you don't necessarily love. But I think, I definitely think that he could be an all-star for sure in this OKC situation.
Love it. Next one. They just want your opinion on Derek Lively. Maybe I'm assuming probably as a Thunder fit.
Yeah, Derek Lively, in a lot of other classes, he would be, the best rim protector, or, probably not last year, but in a lot of other ones, somebody who really came on as the year went on, and he was able to get a little bit more acclimated and kind of get more minutes, earn those. High level rim protector, somebody who can play, a few coverages in the pick and roll, definitely excels and drop. And on the offensive end is able to use his athleticism and length to finish plays. Now he's got to improve as a screener a little bit more, and also either shoot the three, or or improve his touch around the rim in terms of like little floaters or finishing things beyond dunks. But as that guy who can anchor a defense and block shots and finish plays around, your big time playmakers, that's really the pitch for him. In an OKC situation, I don't know, like that's the thing, going back to Chet, like if you want that next to Chet, and have Chet playing more perimeter oriented and less, of the lob stuff and, screen setting and all that kind of stuff that we saw him do at times at Gonzaga, then I think that makes sense. But if you want to go in a different direction, I probably would, just given that in crunch time, Derek Lively would probably end up being on the bench for those most optimal lineups, then I'd probably go in a different direction.
Love it. Big Mike and Z asks, who are you picking as a late riser in this class? Kind of like what J-Dub did last year.
Yeah, J-Dub is a one of a kind, because he was not like really looked at as a legitimate NBA prospect. And, I saw him at times and I was like, he's interesting, but I didn't really like dive into the Santa Clara film as much as in games that they weren't playing Gonzaga. Obviously, you saw him drop Chet that one time and I was like, there might be something there. But I don't know if there's going to be somebody like that. I think Kobe Buffkin has kind of risen over time in a big way. I think he's somebody who could end up being a lottery pick from, a late lottery pick for a certain team. So that would probably be the closest. And then
what about the Santa Clara kid from this year?
Brandon Podziemski. Yeah, he's been a big late riser as well. I'm not sure like if we're talking lottery, but like in overall just
first round,
rise,
late first round.
Yeah. Top 20 potentially. I think that he could be one of those guys.
He seems really fun. And I love that he played at the combine in the 5-on-5. He's really fun. Last one we'll get here. Do you find it difficult evaluating players who play in professional leagues versus college versus G League Ignite? I think if you want to go on a soapbox of overtime elite here as well, and the challenge of scouting that as well, I think that'd be interesting. But what are the challenges of scouting guys from these different levels of basketball?
Yeah, so everything is different. So you always try to get as much context as possible, not only on the court, but like in terms of like what their coaches are trying to execute, and things from the past, the other players that they're playing with, just kind of give you enough context as possible to like, so you're informed on everything that's going on. So that's like one of the more main difficulties with some of these international leagues or non-college alternatives. Obviously college, we have the track record, we know what things look like. Big 12, we know how that game is played there. We know the SEC and how Big 10 basketball differs from other conferences. So we have all that context. That's obviously a lot easier than other things. But yeah, you kind of just try to look at certain things that are translatable. How are people playing off the ball, and the type of shots that they're getting. Evaluating, defense and in the context of things, how is the spacing on certain ends of the floor. So you kind of just try to take as much detail as you can from all parts of the game, and then try to put it together. Overtime Elite, of course, is brand new. Also, before I get into that, the G League, we kind of have a little bit more context too, and we see certain players that play in the NBA. Obviously, it's a little bit different game, but we know everything. Like, we know these players. They're playing more NBA style. It's a little bit easier to look at the Ignite than it would be, the college game, or any alternative that is out there. But for the overtime, this is brand new. We're kind of getting reference points all over the place, whether it's the Jalen Martins and Jay Gort's going to the combine and elite camp and performing at a solid level and just getting to see them against those college guys, or it's the my mind is blanking. Why my mind is blanking? What is his name from OTE?
I can't. I know absolutely nothing about the.
I know. But anyways, yeah. Whether it's those two or seeing what Jan Montero did last year, and Don Barlow.
There you go. Yep.
I'm losing my mind.
I wouldn't
have
really
well.
That.
Yeah. He played really well down the stretch of the season, and it was good to see like that from what we saw last year. So just kind of getting all those reference points, and then obviously the Thompson twins are two very unique prospects in themselves. So that's a difficult thing. We'll know better in time, but yeah, just kind of taking everything for what it is.
Nice. I always said leading up to this combine that it'd be awesome if Amen and Asar played in the scrimmages, just because we've never seen them go up against like guys of that level before. There's obviously no way in hell they would do it, right? The only thing that would happen with that is stock would drop, like their stock wouldn't rise. But I still thought it'd be fascinating. Keandre, before we let you go, Tayler and I want to play a little game. We're going to give you the name of a guy in the 2023 class. And it's just rapid fire. We're going to shoot off a name. You respond with an adjective, single word that describes that guy. First thing that comes to your mind. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. I will kick us off, and then Tayler, you take every other name.
Cool.
First one, we got to start with Wemby.
Generational.
I thought you were going to say that.
It's a great one. Little tougher one, Leonard Miller.
Toolsy.
Okay. Cason Wallace.
Dog.
Oh, I love it.
That's a good one. Scoot.
Dynamic.
Okay. Jarris Walker.
Good one.
Physical.
Yeah, that boy, his measurements at the combine. Holy shit, he's a big boy.
He is. It's crazy. Brandon Podjimski. Nick had to correct me on that one early on this year.
Yeah, I would say crafty. I know that's kind of attributed to white guys only sometimes, but it's there. It's
got that sneaky athleticism.
Yeah.
Ray and Repair.
Raw.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
Asar Thompson.
I was gonna say, I'm trying not to say the same things again. Special.
Okay. Keontae George.
Bucket. Yeah.
That's a good one too. And then last one, you mentioned him earlier, Taylor Hendricks.
Tough. We'll go tough.
Nice.
I like that.
My favorite one's the
done.
Cason Wallace one. Thunder need more dogs. Get me Cason Wallace over here.
Yeah.
I love it. Keandre, before we let you go, plug all your stuff. Tell everybody where they can find you and what content you have coming up on the YouTube channel over the next 4 weeks leading up to the draft.
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube, Hoop Intellect. We'll be dropping scatter reports, very often until leading up to the draft. Like the guy you said, Leonard Miller, that will be coming up in the next week or so, or whenever it is. Got some stuff on Twitter, Hoop Intellect. You can find me on there as well. Probably be posting a little more clips closer to the draft, just on certain things. I know people enjoy seeing it in that format, but I'm kind of busy at the moment. But yeah, that's where you can find me. I'm on IG as well. Probably won't post too much there until like Summer League and everything. But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Of course. It's always great to catch up with you, Keandre. We will be at Summer League as well, so we'll have to link up at some point, hopefully for that Chet versus Wemby matchup that I pray to every God listening that we get. We really appreciate you coming on. It's always very insightful. You guys go, if Keandre is not already in your YouTube feed, in your cycle for draft stuff, stop what you're doing right now and go make it part of your cycle, because his stuff is must watch as you prepare for the NBA draft. We will be back with you guys Sunday night, 9 p.m. as always. So enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you soon. Until then, Thunder up.